Is this Thinker online now?
This is Thinker.
Excellent! Woohoo! A talk with no technical problems.
Awesome.
But you are wearing the standard hacker uniform of a hoodie, and you are in a dark parking lot with a street light right now. Very
Yes.
shady.
Yes. I guess just call me Deep Throat. I'm showing up at shady places and dark places, and yeah,
So let me check. Your time slot runs
30 minutes.
for, yeah, about 30 minutes. So you can start.
All right. So I'm live.
Yeah, you're live.
I'm live. Okay. Well, uh, thank you for having me. My subject of my talk is so you want to start a information security program. And the source of this talk even comes from the fact that I'm in the middle of doing this right now. Uh, Whenever I showed up at my current employer, I was involved uh, with a compliance program at that point. But then fast forward a few years, merger and acquisitions, and all of a sudden I'm dealing with uh, compliance in a grander scheme and a grander size of company, and come to find out they know nothing about it. So I have to be the one to teach them, which means I had to learn myself. um, so probably the first step really whenever you're trying to start your information security program is to know what's the center of that program. Why are you starting it in the first place? The reason I was starting mine is because the compliance efforts that the bigger company was undertaking, they didn't have half the stuff they needed in place. They didn't have your tools. They didn't have your policies. So compliance was my thing, and so I started to teach them about compliance while working on this program. First steps, compliance is the center of what I was doing. So as I started to teach them about the stuff they needed to know about compliance, then I had to step back and say, okay, what tools do I need for them to get into place? Now, these tools are important no matter whether you were talking about um, whether you're talking about just setting up a program in general, whether you're aiming for compliance, but probably the first and foremost is a SIEM, Security Information and Events Management Program. Why? Because you need to know what's going on in your network. You need to be able to identify what's going on at any given time. And raise your hand if you like to actually manually sift through logs. Anybody? Really? Yeah, no, I don't either. Um, Sifting through logs is probably one of the most tedious things you can do. But if you have a way to have those logs be sifted through automatically for you to receive your alerts, receive your regular reports, so you already know what's going on, that takes away that manual work. And then you get your alerts and you're regularly up to speed. Another thing is that a lot of times you're going to be in a position of you don't want people to take proprietary information out of the network. That's where data loss prevention comes into play. Um, Prior to the last few years, a lot of people still approach data loss prevention with all those nice methods of locking down your workstations to where nobody can do anything on them. Well, that's one method, but data loss prevention software has come a long way in being granular, in being able to know what's being done, how it's being done, and like any other piece of software that's supposed to keep track on things, if you fine tune it properly, it can work. It can prevent things from being copied. It could prevent things from being put onto flash drives, onto other network attached storage, into cloud storage. Even cloud storage is a very easy exit point these days. Then on top of that, you also need to be able to manage manage vulnerabilities, manage antivirus. There's a whole list right there whenever it gets right down to it. However, the big thing, more than anything else, if you are not good with paperwork, you need somebody that's good with paperwork. My friend, accidental CISO, and some of you say, why do you say CISO? It's CISO. Okay, accidental CISO. He has been one of those people that has been in the same shoes that I've been in. And if you watch what he's talking about a lot of times on Twitter, you can see he's talking about writing policy, talking about how you need to keep up with the compliance audits, how you need to, it's paperwork after paperwork after paperwork. And really, when you get down to it, security programs, especially being centralized with compliance as the effort behind it, it is one of those things that it's more about keeping track of what you're doing, document what you're doing, write your policies, document when something happens. So somebody being able to do paperwork is a big deal. In half a second here. All right. And I apologize, bear with me. I've actually been in the middle of a compliance audit, and have I actually had time to write down all my bullet points? No. Oh. And welcome back to the seat, Kim. This was my biggest worry about policy. I believe I have not been effective right now.
I've been enjoying. Continue. I think you're effective.
Well, I have been sitting here realizing that I have been jumping from one thing to another, and as I just admitted to anybody listening still at this point before you sat back down,
okay,
I didn't even honestly had an opportunity to even write out a bullet point list before I sat down to do this. As some of you may know, people that are considered thinkers tend to be people that take their time with their thoughts. And I don't feel like I've been able to take my time with my thoughts at the moment. Oh.
No, I'm checking Twitch. Everything's working on Twitch now. And I'm checking YouTube. And yeah, you're live on YouTube too.
Okay, has anybody said get this guy off the screen yet?
No, no, no. We're enjoying your talk.
Oh. Okay, so can you do me a huge favor and save me the embarrassment of a blank mind at this point? And let's just talk for the next 20 minutes
Okay.
about anything, because I, as anybody that has listened to any of my podcasts that I put up, they realize I do much better whenever I'm having a back
Oh,
and forth
you have a
conversation.
podcast.
Yes.
Tell us about your podcast.
Oh, the 10 Questions podcast is what I've got out there. Um, I started it really entirely on a whim. Um, yeah,
That's just my
backlash.
microwave, people. Don't worry.
I started it on a whim last year, just cause. I don't even remember why I did. Um, but whenever I did it, I was just like, okay, who wants to talk? Who wants to record a podcast tonight? And it was Juno that was the first person that actually ended up being on there. We had the infamous conversation about gravy that ended up a number of people have been asked about gravy since then. But yeah, the podcast has been anything but information security. It's been about people in information security and their stories. And you know, I like to do compliance. I like to do information security programs. I like to document things. I like all that stuff. And I am good at it, despite the fact that I can sit here and have a hard time explaining it.
I'm just gonna make sure that my microwave.
That's fine. Yeah, I promise you that the powers that be, the overlords at the company, they have the same issues with me at times. They're like, okay, you can't articulate your ideas very well, but as you can tell, it's one of those things that whenever I'm speaking off the cuff, whenever I'm on the spot, even though in this particular case I put myself on the spot, not my strong suit, and that's actually probably part of that would be part of the reason that I even went ahead and put in to speak at Disinfosec in the first place, because I am autistic. I do have ADHD. I have generalized anxiety issues. I do have OCD, and it is. I mean, the list is big there. I operate a lot more eloquently behind a keyboard.
We have a lot in common, except for the anxiety disorders. We have everything else in common.
Yeah.
Autism, ADHD, operating better on the keyboard.
Yes. And that's probably why I actually do really solidly working in overall information security programming and compliance, in all that nice little documentation and writing policy, because I could sit down and I could write you a policy. It might take a little while, but it will be formed. It will hit all the points. It will give you everything you need to know. And I mean, heck, in a different life, I probably would have been a lawyer, although I wouldn't have been a lawyer that does court cases, like actually go to court. I probably would be more of like a patent lawyer or something.
From the lawyers that I have spoken to, they say that like 2% of the time is actually spent in court, and the other 98% of the time is on paperwork.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and a lot of those little bitty ins and outs. Whenever you deal with law, is the same type of stuff whenever you're dealing with compliance. I mean, heck, one of the policies that I wrote up for the audit efforts that we're working on right now is for people taking PCI calls remotely. And anybody that deals with compliance, and especially PCI, they can tell you that that's a touchy spot. And what I ended up having to do with that policy, it was almost a legal document more than it was just a policy, because it's something that had to hit on okay, here's all the things that we're going to do as a company that you have to agree to let be done on your personal computer for these specific reasons that keep the company in good position, that keep the company at the least liable position. But in the same vein, because it starts to encroach on personal computers and personal space, that policy also had to provide that room to address any perceived privacy breaches by the company. So it's it's funny. The current president of the company, the first time I ever had a good solid conversation with him, one of the things that he made a very distinct point to get across to me was one of the worst dirty words for him ever is liability. And the efforts that I'm doing in my own company, it's to reduce the company's liability no matter what direction you're floating, whether you're talking about those privacy protections or you're talking about the compliance that has to be met as well, because the goal is company liability being at zero as close as possible. Now, one other thing I would even dip in toward, I kind of alluded to it with a comment earlier about how in the past a lot of people have used just locking down computer environments as tight as flipping possible to prevent things. And I think most people in our circles would actually agree with what I'm about to say, but you can't do it just with technology. It is part technology, part operational security. There is always a human factor. You have to always consider the human factor. You have to be able to put some measure of trust in the day-to-day users of your network, but have that safety net in place in case the trust that you have put in them ends up being failed. Yeah, there's just previous management that I dealt with. So we were replacing our firewalls in our network, and in our firewalls we had web filtering in there, like most any other business. And some of what the web filtering did was prevented people from doing things like going to Facebook, other social media, stuff like that, while they were on shift and working in the company network. Well, through a series of mishaps, we were unable to get that firewall replaced with the new set before the licensing for the filtering went out on the old one. And so I got a lot of side eye from the old management, because they're like, all these people are playing games and going on social media, and it was a old guard type entrenched good old boy type group that was in management previously, and I couldn't just stand there and say, okay, well, do your job and police your people. But Everybody from that old grouping is gone now, and I am actually able to have those conversations with management of, yeah, I'll do this, but you still got to watch them. You still got to, you still actually have to be a manager. You still actually have to give them expectations and hold them to the expectations. I mean, that's what I want from management that deals with me. How am I expected to know what's considered doing my job effectively by my managers if they don't give me those expectations and hold me to them?
People don't
I,
realize, but you're absolutely correct about all this. Like
yeah.
human beings, their behavior at work, stubborn management are pretty much the biggest problems in corporate cybersecurity.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, if you want probably the most obvious examples of stuff like this, um, I know some of my favorite shows are ones like Bar Rescue, Restaurant Impossible, yeah, Gordon Ramsay stuff, whenever he did Kitchen Nightmares and now doing 24 Hours to Hell and Back. Every time you see shows like that show up on TV, one of the biggest things that they're always addressing is ineffective management. And one of the things you always hear the expert on whichever show you're watching say is, if you actually give the employees systems, expectations, and hold them accountable to those systems and expectations, you'd be amazed at the difference that you would see.
I am
And
so glad I don't have to live with micromanagement anymore.
I so in my company that I'm in right now, I have three levels above me in the org chart. The person that's immediately above me, very very easy to work with. And if I need to pass along information, if he needs to pass along information back to me, not a big deal. The next person up is somebody that always, always, always says that, well, they don't ever say, just do this. I need this done. I need this done. Here's the details you need to figure this out. Here's the details you need to figure that out. And OPSEC wise, yeah, I'm not going to actually show the other side of the paper, but these papers right here in my hand are floor plans for a new physical office that are being opened, and I've had to submit estimates for equipment to deploy that office. But I don't know if it's going to get rejected or not, because nobody ever said, here's your budget. They just said, get estimates. Yeah, or in the compliance efforts of trying to make sure everything was up to snuff, I ended up figuring out that for a VMware installation in the local network, that I needed new hardware to be able to take advantage of the VMware versions that would be up to date, up to snuff. And whenever I pass it along, which, by the way, this guy that's second level up on the org chart from me, not only is he the CTO, he's also the CFO. Yeah.
CEFO?
No. CTO, Chief Technology Officer, and also Chief Financial Officer.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So like a CTO would normally be saying, these are our technical needs, and they're more important than what our next quarterly earnings are.
Exactly.
Whereas the CFO is obsessed with the next quarterly earnings.
Exactly. And everybody I have ever mentioned this to has had the same reaction of, okay, that must be an awkward thing to deal with. yeah, he totally turned down the spend to get the updated hardware to make sure we could take advantage of the VMware versions that were in compliance. And but he kept going with this. Well, you need to find something alternate to do with. Well, we could do this, we could do that, or what. And finally, I just said, if you want me to do this, just say, do this. And he never would. It was like he was always trying to convince me. And I'm just like, no, if you want me to do something, I am the last person you need to convince. Just tell me. If you want something done, I will do it. I am a people pleaser type person. I will do almost anything requested of me, as long as I don't feel that it's going to be something that will cause harm to myself or something that is illegal. Even if I have to put in my objections about that I don't believe something is a certain thing is the right direction to go, I'll put in my objections, and then I'll still do what's been asked of me anyway. So, and then on top of it, you got the company president, and he doesn't want to hear details about anything. He just wants to hear it'll be taken care of. So three very distinct, different ways of being dealt with in the three levels above me on the org chart, and it's difficult. It's especially difficult for somebody that's in the box like I am, in the box like you are, because our brains just don't process that way. And all I'm trying to do is put an effective security program into place. That's all I'm trying to do. And I have told them numerous times that I don't care how we do a lot of this stuff. There's certain marks that have to be met. We have to have something in a certain good shape. But how we get there, I don't care. That's not my big deal.
I don't want to interrupt you too much. I just want to say to everyone who is messaging me via various platforms, I know about the beeping. It is not a battery in a smoke alarm that can be replaced. The smoke alarm is hardwired into a building. It requires a technician to fix. So if you could please stop messaging me about the beeping, I would appreciate it. And yes, I am eating soup right now. So back to you, Th1nk3r.
Oh, no, it's not a big deal in the interruption. I've needed interruptions, as you could tell. Well, once again, I'm not a very good solo person. I'm probably not likely to submit to do a solo talk ever again.
I think you're doing really great. You're speaking from the heart. You're speaking from your own experiences.
But you've also thrown some things in there, asked me questions, spurred me on, and that's what's been probably the biggest help.
Oh no, it's you. It's all you. You deserve all the credit. Honestly, I don't know how autism is or isn't a factor here, but I have always been really nervous about public speaking and going on stage and all that, but very good at completely hiding that I was nervous in any way. Yeah. I enter all situations with, I'm just going to fake confidence. So
yeah,
that's my approach.
Yeah, I've always been in a position of being like super self-aware of how things have appeared to be to me, and maybe my awareness of how things are isn't everybody else's awareness of how they are, but it's just always, for me, it's always made it super difficult. And I know that I've always had issues where sometimes where I'll trip over my own tongue. because my brain is going about 30 times faster than my mouth ever will. But then in other times, it seems like my mouth is going so fast that I actually get everything out before my brain finally catches up. It's there is not a lot of gray area for me in anything. So maybe next time I submit for a talk, I will do it. I will do it as a team talk, because I do normally have an easier time with conversations than I do with just trying to knock something off the top of my head by myself.
I think you've been doing really good. I am very lucky that in my work, I get to work from home, and I get to, honestly, my condo building has an indoor swimming pool. And when I'm frustrated by my work in the middle of the day, I go downstairs and I go into the swimming pool.
There you go.
So I'm really spoiled. I don't have to see my bosses face to face. My bosses, they just email me.
Yep.
But I know from talking to security practitioners like you and many other people that dealing with management is an MRFer.
Yeah, it's wow. Yeah, and I could say too, I believe that I believe that, especially with all the changes with the pandemic stuff in the last few months, between that and a lot of the things that I've gotten the okay to roll out because of the compliance efforts, I may actually be allowed to work from home at my own leisure going forward, which is going to be wonderful.
That would be great. Not just autistic people, but people with a full range of disabilities.
Yes.
Would be able to be a lot more active in the workplace.
Absolutely.
If we could all make use of our internet technology and work from home as much as possible.
Yep. I mean, shoot, since I've been working from home during the pandemic, I don't think I have ever not done work on any given day. I think I've done some amount of work on every single day, but I can go as long as my brain will let me go, and then I can stop and reset. Unlike actually having to be at an office, and yeah, that's a whole nother conversation.
We have Spencer Hunley is now in Zoom. He is doing the next talk. So it's 1:02 p.m. in Toronto right now. So his talk starts in 3 minutes, regardless of which time zone you're in. Right. We're about. I mean, you don't have to like ruin your OPSEC, but no. Which particular area of the United States are you in?
I'm in flyover country, the nice vaunted central time zone. But for those wondering my political leanings, if I'm in flyover country, I am not an ultra conservative person. I'm also not an ultra liberal person. That's one area that I'm definitely very gray area, because I think there's pluses and minuses on both sides.
I'm a Marxist.
Really?
But I can assure you, being in North America's 4th largest city, that you will find a full range of political opinions here.
Absolutely.
The hillbilly stereotypes, the pretentious slitty slicker stereotypes, they're not consistent. There are racist, hateful assholes in Toronto, and there are super progressive people in the middle of Oklahoma.
Yep. So you'll actually find a lot more variety of people practically anywhere these days. It's not a big fat just slap one label anywhere you go.
So I am going to admit Spencer into the chat. I really enjoyed your talk. I will be uploading it to YouTube later, like as a static file, not as like live YouTube.
Awesome.
And thank you very much. And you did a great job.
Thank you.
So I am going to remove Thinker.